Morning, everyone. Oh, I like that. So I won't do any warm-up exercises, although you probably need it this morning, I'm guessing. We're going to start on time. I'm sure other people will drift in as we go on. Just a couple of points of order. Firstly, thank you very much for coming. Always nice to come this far and have people turn up, so that's good, thank you. I have a Twitter client running here, and I've asked the famous Mr. Clayton from Microsoft to keep an eye on that for me through the presentation. So if anything jumps up that he thinks is important enough to shout out, he's going to jump up and do that, or we can kind of go some of those questions at the end. But there's a hashtag on screen, which is MIXPD, P for Paul, D for Dawson. So if you tag anything like that, then we'll kind of spot it. And although it would be nice to get some kind of real face-to-face questions at the end as well. So do what works for you. Okay, so I'll get started. Every presentation, I think, should start with a boring credentials bit, which is essentially the bit that either makes you stand up and leave because you realise you're at the wrong session, or the guy on stage is a bit of a muppet. Hopefully it won't, so I'll just spend 5 minutes just doing that. So who am I? So if you can scan that, you'll get all my details, not my home address. And this is a cross-platform presentation, so I did a QR code as well. I have no idea whether those work or not, but anyway, give them a try. I'll put them at the end as well. Well, my name is Paul Dawson. My job is Experience Director for EMC Conchango. Just very quickly, Conchango is one of the digital design agencies in the UK. We were acquired by EMC to become part of EMC Consulting, and we're just going through a brand crisis at the moment where we work out what we're going to be called. But we're essentially the same company. And what we do is we do very functional things. The way we like to talk about it is we create the hard-working digital experiences that people love. And those words are all chosen fairly carefully because we tend to do the things that are very transactional, very functional, or that are kind of very critical to the businesses we work with. So I'll talk about some of those clients in a minute. And in case you don't believe me, Forrester do a survey every year, and they say we're quite good at it too, so get rid of that one. And some of the clients that we work with, so look at those, and if anyone from any of those companies is in the room, at some point, please put your hand in the air. But we do things like for Tesco, which is a £1 billion online business. We do user experience design and branding. For companies like Virgin Atlantic, we do the same thing, but we also then build out their online reservation system, ticketing, check-in, as well as self-service check-in kiosks that you'll see in the airport. So when you're checking in tomorrow for your flight home to Gatwick, if any of you are going that way, then please feel free to curse me and my team for that, although it's very good. And we do a variety of work, and it ranges from great big websites to things that are more, I guess, in the innovation territory. So recently, and you might have seen this at the PDC conference, if any of you caught that, did a piece of innovation work for Tesco around how they move into your home and become more of a part of the way you manage your household using touchscreen devices. And touchscreen and being kind of out of the web has been something that has grown in importance for us in the last 2 or 3 years. And that's really kind of the focus of today, if you like. So did anyone see me last year? No, so you won't matter than wearing the same clothes then, that's good. But what we did was look at the philosophy of total experience design, and essentially what that is saying we're used to, as web developers and designers, or surface developers and designers, or whatever we are, thinking very much only about the bit that we can develop and design for. And we thought there were some opportunities kind of missed when we did that, and started to consider a much wider user journey. So to put that in context, with somebody like Virgin Atlantic, who are an airline, we tended to think about, okay, you're coming to book a flight. And we kind of then rethought that, thinking that a flight is just one little bit of an overall experience. And it's an experience that starts at home by saying something like, I want to go and see my family. I want to go shopping in New York. Those kind of things. So things that are very personal and emotional. And when we were considering just the web bit and the web user journeys, we weren't kind of getting the full picture. And Virgin Atlantic is a good example of a company that does this very well, and thinks very much outside of the bit, and in their case, the plane, if you like. And we showed things like this. So if you go around looking around the web for what people think of that particular brand, that particular company, they say things like, I love Virgin Atlantic. In the same way, they say things like, I love Zappos, I love ASOS. There are a few brands that have really developed very emotional engagement. And you start to look at what it is about their product that makes people do that. And you look inside something like the premium economy cabin, you say, that is a brilliant cabin. Great seat, great in-flight entertainment. But it can't be just that, because in the airline business, these things come and go. It's going to be pretty soon before somebody comes along and invents a much better premium economy product. And they can undercut on price. And they can do more flight today. And there are lots of ways in which other airlines can compete against that very, very easily. So what Virgin Atlantic very much realized was that the brand experience is much, much more than just what's on board. So they started to do things like this. Now, these are the salt and pepper shakers that you get if you're lucky enough to be sitting in an upper-class suite on board Virgin Atlantic. And you get them, and they're only about this big, and you kind of look at them and you think, that's very sweet, I like that. That's very cute, I might take those home for the children. You turn them over, and on the bottom it says, pinched from Virgin Atlantic. And you kind of hit yourself in the head and say, I can't believe they thought ahead. They've got that one step ahead of me. They're thinking about me and how I'm responding to these things in that context. So a very emotional experience. And it's something that we talk about as being brilliant basics, magic touches. Because if you operate an airline, an e-commerce shop, a retail store, a bank, you have to get the basics right, otherwise people don't come back. Because if the flights never get there on time and the toilets are dirty and the in-flight entertainment doesn't work, that's not on. So you have to do those things and you have to do them very well. But they simply drive loyalty. They're the basics. The magic touches that layer on top of that are what someone like Lou Carbone would talk about as experience. And it's that layer that drives the emotional engagement that turns loyalty into advocacy. So that phrase, brilliant basics, magic touches, has kind of peppered everything we do around experience design. And I've got a new clicker, as anyone who's from following Twitter probably knows, and it doesn't always work, and it's kind of upside down. So anyway. So experience planning is the discipline that we use to then follow those journeys and kind of work out what the best experience is and what the opportunities are for innovation around that experience. And part of that is about setting out a vision, a very demanding vision, a very compelling vision, but something that is also very achievable. So did anyone see the Microsoft 2019 videos where they're exploring kind of what might the future be like? There's a guy at the back there, but he's got a blue badge, so he doesn't count. Well, that was very much about where are we going to be in 2019. Now, for me, that's a bit too far out for some of our customers. What's brilliant about those is it makes you think, I wonder what we could do now. And then you kind of break some of those things down. You see where they all come from. You can track back the technology that they're based on. You can track back the consumer trends that they're based on. And you can see very clearly how they can be achievable. But when you put them in front of the board of a large enterprise company and say, guys, this is where we should be going, what they're thinking about is this year's profit and loss figures, their projections for next year, and what they're going to do maybe 2 years after that. They don't think necessarily about 2019 other than at a very strategic, high level. So part of experience planning is about setting a vision that's much more achievable. And what I want to do today is follow a scenario around that to kind of illustrate what that might be like. Because the other problem we face as designers is, for want of a better word, selling the development team down the river, as it has been known. So brainstorming, innovating, designing things that a development team look at and say, I'm not going to be able to do that for the next 3 years. You know, what we need to do is what's in the next sprint? What are we doing next? So experience planning is about setting a realistic goal that the whole team can buy into and say, I would love to get there, and I can see how we can get there in maybe 2 or 3 years' time. So that's what we kind of look at today. And where we explored that last year, we followed a journey around the Virgin Galactic brand, which is the space tourism brand. And it ended in places like this, where customers could create digital memories using tools like WPF to render them in a way that was very unique, but equally very, very achievable. So that's last year. And part of total experience design has always been around exploring things outside of our traditional kind of remit, if you like, the devices and the tools that we have to play with. So we're going to look at that philosophy again. We're going to look at why I think now is the right time for that to really come through, because when times are tough, people are looking for slightly different things. But also how there are some things that have changed in the wider world of technology that create some new opportunities that we haven't necessarily thought of before. Then we're going to look at some new paradigms of behaviors and for design. So what is total experience design? I'm going to give away a bottle of champagne. I haven't bought it yet, but I will do, for the first person to answer this question correctly. And one of you will get it, especially if you're from the Netherlands. So the question simply is, what's that? Now, it's a box. It is a shoebox. I'll tell you that much. But what's it for? Anyone? Storing photos? No. What was that? Put shoes in? No. It's got if anyone can read the branding on it, which you can't actually from that picture, that might give you a bit more of a clue. Chance to win is slipping away quickly, so I'm going to start giving clues. Okay, it's from the Netherlands. The branding on the box is a private bank. Storage? No. I know a lot about storage there now. Money. What about money? No, the private bank is not suggesting that the safest investment is to keep your money in the shoebox under the bed, although that might be true. No? Excellent, I win. Right, okay. So actually what this bank realized was that their customers were very busy, they had lots of paperwork, and what they were asking them to do every month was to go through a lot of pain to take care of what should have been fairly basic things. So this bank said, okay, we will ship you a shoebox every month, and what we want you to do is take all your paperwork, or your speeding tickets, your tax forms, your expense claims, throw them all in the shoebox and just send it to us, and we will take care of the rest. And this is how they advertised it. So this kind of machine that essentially is not really inside the box, but just marketing PR. But that is an idea that if you were a private banker dealing in things like digital channels, in branches, mobile devices, Microsoft Surface, wouldn't necessarily naturally have occurred to you. And the challenge really is that, how likely is it that you would have come up with that idea? Very often, the ideas that are the best ideas, or the best things about some of the stuff we do, is stuff that we don't control. So when we first built and designed and built a website for Virgin Mobile, the best thing that website never did was ship you a phone the next day. And that was part of an overall experience that said, okay, well, we can control the booking process, the checkout, the browse, the research, the comparison, all that kind of stuff. But the killer bit is that if you order it before 4 o'clock, it will be on your doorstep the next morning. And that's what we mean entirely by total experience design. So it is about thinking wider. And I say, when you start to do that, you do come up with some interesting things. And sometimes when people talk about creativity and having good ideas, we talk about idea collisions. Now, when I thought about this and thought, yes, this is true. The best ideas are collisions of two ideas. And I struggled to find examples. But people do talk about it a lot. So I did find a couple. So you're presumably familiar with DVD technology, hopefully. And there's another technology, I guess, which we in the UK would call the Royal Mail, which is the postal service. Sorry, I'll just put that one in a bit more of a cultural setting for over here. But those two things peacefully coexisted, post, letters, and DVDs for a long time. And then finally somebody said, wait a minute, if we put them together, what we end up with is Netflix or lovefilm.com. And suddenly an entirely new business was born that you sit there and think about today and think, yeah, that kind of made sense. I wish I'd thought of that. And we know entire businesses that were founded on the basis of one simple question, which is, what can I ship people that will fit through their letterbox? And that's a brilliant proposition for an e-commerce site. So there's a site called Fig Leaves, for example, which sells underwear. And they started simply by saying, we're going to sell stuff, and we want to ship it to people, we want to make sure it always gets through their letterbox, and you never have to get that little ticket that says you were out when we called. So let's do something that's small enough to fit in a little package and go through your letterbox. To the point where they even went and measured letterboxes in the UK to find out what was the average size, what was the smallest size, what was the optimum size for a package to actually go through that box. So to ensure that we kind of come across those things, we need to have a lot of different inputs, and we need to look and listen to a lot of alternative perspectives and different points of view. So if you look at something like the invention of photography, and you track back where that came from, and you go back to Ibn al-Haytham, and I got someone to teach me the pronunciation of that, in around the year 1000, who started doing a lot more with the camera obscura, which essentially is a dark room with a hole in it, and it projects an image onto the back wall. But even he said, and if you can't read Latin, it is Latin, isn't it? Yeah. He said, we didn't invent this. We're building on a lot of different innovations, a lot of thoughts that have happened so far. And certainly, we wouldn't recognize that as the photography that we know today. And then Joseph Nietzsche, I'm not sure I pronounced that one right, in 1824 came along and started working on how to capture the image from a camera obscura more permanently. Because the only way to do it at that time was to literally draw on the image as it was projected, and he wasn't very good at drawing. So that, born out of pure necessity, he started to work on ways of capturing that image. In about 1765 he was born, and then did this all around about 1824. But the technology he had was chemistry, and what he couldn't do was make this stuff stick, so it would fade very quickly. So he'd capture an image using silver chloride and all that kind of stuff, but it faded. And he was kind of stuck, so he didn't really know where to turn. And where he turned to was the theatre. And he met a guy called Louis Daguerre, and Louis Daguerre was a theatre designer and special effects guy. And I have no idea how they met or how he even thought to talk to this guy, because their worlds were so far apart. But between them, they had enough knowledge to create the daguerreotype, which was really the first permanent image capture for photography. And it led to some very iconic images. No idea who that guy is, but he's on the back of all my bills. Anyway, I do know he is. And then from there on in, he said that was the moment where those two things collided, and that was the kind of magic moment, if you like. And from there on, it was just, I guess, a matter of refinement. And people talk about things like the box brownie as actually being the moment where suddenly photography became accessible and realizable. And yes, those things are all true, but there was this kind of magic point way back when these two completely different worlds collided. And if we weren't looking to collaborate and looking to different areas for insights and expertise that we just don't know about, we never kind of stumble across those. So in the world that I inhabit, which is a digital design and development world, design is an integrated discipline. Technical architects play as much a part in the design of something as a user experience professional, an experience planner, a copywriter, a visual artist, for example. Because if you don't have those skills together, you just can't uncover the kind of opportunities that you really need. So, as Bill Buxton would say, don't be precious with your ideas, have lots, just be good at having lots of them. We have to be just spitting these things out constantly. And he also says, always be bad at something. And what I took that to mean, because I never asked him, was uncover areas that you're completely unfamiliar with, and start learning how other people think and how other people do things, and learn some new skills so that you can incorporate those into what you do. And I think that's absolutely bang on. So I guess the thing that I would say we're in now, or we need now, is the new Renaissance. Because if you go back to the Renaissance, and you look at the way people thought, it was kind of a defining moment. And today, if we don't deliver things that are feasible, viable, and desirable, they are just not going to stick. People are not going to invest in them. And that's, I guess, the hardest part of my job, is convincing people that what they need to do will get adopted by their customers, is feasible to deliver, i.e. it's going to cost the right amount of money, and it's going to deliver the right amount of money in return. And that's a hard thing to do. And what Total Experience Design as a philosophy has done is underpin that and build a really good story that really gets people to the point where they say, yes, I believe that's going to work, and I can see how it's going to deliver on that. And if you look at that kind of Renaissance thinking, it was the kind of perfect meshing of art and science. So you had people like Leonardo da Vinci, who was equally accomplished as an artist as he was a scientist. I guess science was emerging, but he painted the Mona Lisa, but he also designed, arguably, the first helicopter. Don't ask me what year that was in, but you can look it up. And what, I guess, politically correctly you call a polymath, rather than a Renaissance man, is that person that I think last year Microsoft called a diviner, potentially, which is a complete cross between left brain and right brain expertise. So having the practicality and the artistic things together. Now that's incredibly rare. And then the Industrial Revolution came along and kind of trashed it completely and drove out specialists. So you had artists like J.M. Turner and engineers like Isambard Kingdom Brunel, both creating incredible things that you might look at and say they're amazing works of art, but we're starting to specialize and go down different routes where we're not really collaborating. And that specialization continued for a long time until really industrial design, as we know it today, or product design kind of came about. And there, the four dimensions of design started to come back together again, where people thought as much about aesthetics and form as they did about function and practicality and buildability and those kind of things. Well, I mean, we say that. I mean, we still work with some incredibly bad products today, and these things come in little pockets. So you look at things like this and start to think, are these things really coming together? Sorry, I forgot. Let's try this one instead. OK. So products like the Zune. I love my Zune. I no longer have an iPod. Anyone else in the room say that? I think you might think I'm crazy, I don't know. But what I love about it is it's an entirely designed experience. It's a piece of industrial product design that really works. The visual UI is beautiful. It feels very nice, so it has a sense of momentum and feedback and physics about it, as well as looking very pretty. The social features show that there's a thinking about this, that it's not about how many features can we cram into this device. Thank you. It's more about how are people going to use this device? How's it going to fit into their lifestyle? And then that experience is carried right through into all the product, the packaging, the delivery, the words they use, all that kind of stuff. And it's a brilliant piece of industrial design. There's another one. I don't have one of those. I do have a Volvo, but anyway. But Pininfarina, who took on automotive design, now, I don't know whether they started as visual artists or engineers, but they certainly have to have all of those skills to bring them together in a way that works within the constraints of the materials that they have to work in, but equally pushing the boundaries. So, for example, looking at the use of composite materials rather than pressed steel. At some point was a thing they started to do, and they said, I wonder if we could actually do this. So I coined the term the New Renaissance and thought that's very clever of me. But then I found that that term was coined in 1543. So I was a bit screwed there. And in 1977, a British philosopher, I think he was, started to talk about us being in another Renaissance now where we're exploring the cosmos and reality. So I thought, I'm not sure I can really explore the reality at MIX. But so instead, I decided to recall it the New Renaissance. So and I'll just keep adding the word new until no one's done it before. But it is, I think, about where great design comes from. It's about having all of those abilities in a single team that are thinking in the wider context of how people live their lives, essentially. And it is about uncovering all of those assets, the opportunities, and, as Bill says, it's about just not being precious with your ideas. So we sometimes work in multi-agency teams where an advertising agency, a direct marketing agency, a digital agency, and a more kind of design and build agency work together. And very often, you find that you all work together to come up with some great ideas, and then one of the guys goes away, goes back to the client and says, I've got a great idea. I didn't give it out in that form. That's not the way we're going to deliver great stuff. We're going to deliver great stuff if we all combine our expertise, and that's kind of what we're saying, really. So we've got to find those things. So I thought we'd look at some of those things. So in every project we walk into, we certainly say, what assets have we got? What does this business have? What does this product have that we've never worked with before or that we can leverage or use? And sometimes it's about data. Sometimes it's about media exposure, and most often it is about technology. So let's have a look at some of those. So we do have, I think, so I sat in the keynote room here in 2006, and it was a bit of a defining moment for me when they were showing this thing called WPF, Windows Presentation Foundation. And what was becoming clear to me from that was that there are huge opportunities here in the way that we visualize things that are functional, where data can create a user interface. We sometimes use this term, content is the new design, if you like. And technologies like WPF being very data-driven, able to bring in assets from a whole bunch of different data sources. And content is rapidly becoming the aesthetic of the applications that we use. And inputs. So we used to have just the keyboard, then we had the keyboard and the mouse, and then we had a touch screen, and now we have multi-touch, and now we have massive multi-touch, multi-users around the same device. Things like Windows 7, which has very good sensor integration, so the ability to use a proximity sensor, a photo light sensor, all sorts of other sensors that I don't even know about. And natural user interaction, the NUI, they all create new opportunities to do things that are multi-user around huge interfaces. I guess like this one. Maybe not that one. Sorry, this is the one I meant to show. Which was shown at CeBIT. This is on the Microsoft stand at CeBIT show in Germany a few weeks ago. And it's a gesture-driven wall. So you stand on a spot, and there are cameras and infrared, and it tracks movement, and it's very Minority Report, I guess. So these technologies are pretty well embedded now. They're out there, they're in use, and they're available to us on the platforms that we work in. And the other one is around the ease of integration. When those kind of large-scale infrared, multi-touch walls were kind of first invented, Bill Buxton says he was working on those kinds of things 10, 15 years ago. And you'll have seen YouTube videos from people like Jeff Hand going back several years as well. What's changed now is that these things are available to us in some of the development technologies that we're familiar and comfortable with. So Microsoft Surface, you look at, and a lot of people look at that and say, yeah, I got my R&D guys to knock up that with a Wii remote and some other stuff, and we did it in about a couple of days, and it's cost us 50 quid. And you're telling me that Microsoft Surface is $15,000. Why would I want to do that? Well, can you ship 150 of those things that you just built in the other room? No, you can't. But you can do that with Microsoft Surface. Do you have developers who work in Java and C# that can maintain this thing ongoing? No, but we've got loads that work in .NET and C#. So those are the opportunities that kind of make this more accessible to us today. And if you look at the devices we work with, they're connected to the web. They're IP machines running applications, which means that when they're strung together, they can start to interact with each other. This is at Disneyland. They're 4 Microsoft Surface devices connected together. And you can start to see how motion between devices. Now, these things happen to be sitting next to each other, but why wouldn't they be in different rooms? Why can't I take a piece of digital imagery and throw it across a surface and it arrive in a room down there? That's very feasible today. I couldn't find an example of one, but it's very doable. So why shouldn't devices talk to each other? And when you put them on top of a platform, or underneath the platform, I guess, if we're talking about the cloud, where you've got perpetual access to data, where my personal data is stored and is unlocked with something simple like a Windows Live ID or a PIN number or a smart card or something, then you start to look at the concepts of ubiquitous computing, the fact that I can walk up to a device, it can know who I am, can pull down my application data, my personal data, my whatever, and start to let me access it on the spot. But are we kind of really leveraging those opportunities yet? And particularly when we look at the built environment. And the reason we explored this was really that we are working increasingly in the built environment. And in retail, it's called multi-channel. It's also called just being on the web and in store at the same time. But increasingly, this has grown in importance for us over the years. So we started working with kiosks, simple touchscreen interfaces running either a web application or something like something authored in Director, it used to be. And the first one of those that kind of really took hold in the UK was for an electrical retailer called Dixons. And Dixons sold all sorts of things, but they put this in a camera department. And it was a bit of a trial on what kiosk technology could bring to that environment. So when doing a project like that, obviously you consider what are our key performance indicators? What metrics are we going to measure to understand the success of this? So what success metrics do you think they placed on a kiosk in a camera department? What was it going to change for Dixon selling cameras? Any thoughts? Sell more cameras? That's exactly what they said. Did they sell more cameras? No, they didn't sell more cameras. So was it a complete failure? No, it wasn't, because what happened, this kiosk basically told you the benefits of the camera. So it simply explained things like what is red eye flash, what is automatic exposure. And what was happening was people would go to it and they would find these things. And they go, yeah, I don't know what red eye flash is. I keep hearing it, I don't know what it is. And I see the difference between photo taken without, photo taken with. And I go, actually, that would be useful. Which cameras have that? And then they would go and buy that camera. Now, that's a different experience from a sales guy talking to you when you've picked up a £20 camera, $20 camera, whatever it might be, and him saying, yeah, but you should have red eye flash, because you take like family photographs and stuff, don't you? And so I bet that's more money, isn't it? Yes, it's more money, but it's really worth it. And it was completely different. So what happened in Dixons was that the average order value of cameras shot up significantly because people were selling themselves up on those benefits. Now, you then look at something like Microsoft Surface, and that's a device we started working with a few years ago. No, less than that, isn't it? It hasn't been around that long. But anyway, for a while. And then look at the opportunities with that. And we're looking at opportunities that are much more around collaborative computing, but not things that just live and die in the environment itself, but things where the journey starts at home. So I might be doing some planning, some research, something online. I then carry that through into store, into branch, whatever it might be. Do something with somebody where I can take some advice, I can share what I'm doing, I can formulate something that's actually going to work for me, and then I can even take it away, again, back home where I'm comfortable in my own environment and work out, did that guy just sell me, or do I want to change anything? I didn't change anything I didn't feel comfortable about, and have that as a complete experience. So digital in the built environment is very important to us. And that's where we started looking at this thought about, okay, what would happen if we started, so they gave me the clicker, right? And it's the wrong way around. So I keep going the wrong way. So it is about looking outside of those usual channels. So we thought we'd look at some of the opportunities inside a digital building. So I'd noticed somebody's T-shirt on the way in that gave me a clue that somebody might actually work in this industry. Does anybody in this room work with any of those kinds of systems? Or are you just wearing the free T-shirt? Okay, I'll talk to you later. But in the last 30 years, buildings have got smart. They have technology embedded in them. Now, this city and all the cities in the world is the optimal place to really see that. And you don't see half of it. So if you sit at a gaming table on a casino floor, there are 16 different camera angles on you in this particular hotel. And that stuff is all piped back to central control rooms. I have no idea what they look like because we're not allowed in them. But these buildings have started to get smart. But they're all around very specific uses: security, environmental control, lighting, telephony, communications, those kinds of things. And buildings increasingly are starting to become to the point where they can adapt to the environment around them. We have things like near-field communication, or RFID. So tiny, inert, passive chips that sit inside cards, inside mobile phones, that have large detector loops that can detect when you're in them or near them. We use them in the UK to go on the underground system. The Oyster card, as we call it, is now kind of embedded as part of our London culture. So are we leveraging any opportunities around that? There is some fantastic research in what's called smart dust. So guys who have a vision in research of achieving literally dust-sized, fully featured computers with Wi-Fi, processing power, battery power, capable of sensing and then transmitting inputs and outputs. Now today they're about that size, but they're getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And the idea is that you would start to embed these in the very fabric that buildings are built with. So literally pour them into a bucket of concrete and then lay it in the floor, and you have a floor that is embedded with, for example, pressure sensors, or sensors that are capable of telling you what the stresses and strains on a building are. Now, the intended use of that today is about telling you when the building is about to fall down. Now, I'd hope the engineers would know that in advance. But if you start to think about what's the opportunity if actually we did have those sensors embedded in the floors and in the ceilings and in the walls, could we use the data that comes from that to do things that actually, rather than adapt the building to its environment, adapts the environment to the users of the building? And that was kind of where some of this opportunity started. And the best website in the world, the best conference in the world, no offense to MIX, TED, shows things like Woody Norris, the guy who invented the sonic cannon. It's a non-lethal way of distributing crowds or generally annoying people from a long distance. And he works with what he calls hypersonic sound. Now, this is sound that, now I'll have to explain this to you, so I thought I'd do it like this. And then I had a sudden defining moment. I have absolutely no idea what that means. So I found this, and it says, I'll read it out. It says, hypersonic sound is an aural laser. And essentially, it's sound that is traveling in a long column that's very, very narrow and very, very focused, and doesn't appear, if you like, until literally it's in front of your eardrums. That's the way Woody describes it. So if you're standing in a supermarket checkout queue, and there's a TV there, and you're watching and you're listening to the sound, and you literally, if you don't want to hear anyone, you just do that, step to one side. And that sound would just be bypassing you. You wouldn't even remotely hear it. You wouldn't even get an echo of it. So if we can control lighting and sound to create tiny macro environments around people, what are the opportunities for that? They must be huge, surely. So that stuff is all there today. Now, some of it's relatively early, but if we're talking in that kind of 3-year time frame, it's feasible today to say that in a year we could have a proof of concept. In 2 or 3 years, we could actually build something that really works like this. So are we leveraging any of that stuff really today? And I don't have the credits for this, but if you look at something like this, I'll let you watch it first because it's very cute. Always include pictures of dogs in presentations because it gets people to laugh. And I think that is great. That's a brilliant piece of experience design. It's playful. It's not intended for dogs, I guess, but there are similar installations that have water, autumnal leaves, that kind of thing. And you can find this on YouTube. I didn't put the username on there. Sorry, I'll put that on. We could watch this all day, couldn't we? But if that got turned off, does the owner of the building, the people that go into the building, do they miss it? They might do for a short time, but will it significantly change their experience of the building? And you look at things like this. Now, when I'll tell you in a minute about our collaboration with some architects, but they're very familiar with this kind of thing, which is about applying essentially outputs, computer outputs to the outside of a building. Now, the manifestation of that is they're little discs that turn over. There's a similar sculpture in Heathrow Terminal 5 called Troika, which is a kind of kinetic sculpture. But simply by changing the orientation of a panel, they can also change the light reflection and therefore change the way a building looks. And you could do that to create patterns, or you could use that to create text output or even images, potentially. But again, looking back at those two things, do they make a tangible difference to the people that use and occupy that building? They are amazing. They're amazing uses of technology that we've talked about. They're very doable and achievable today, but they're not connected. They're not integrated. They don't talk to each other. They don't have a useful purpose. So if we turn them off, yes, they would get missed. There was a big movement in what was called kinetic architecture, about creating buildings that literally shift and change shape. And that's still going on in places like Dubai. But it kind of died as a movement. It kind of died somewhat because once these things went in, they were hard to maintain. And there weren't the people around to maintain them. And they weren't worth maintaining, to be blunt, because they weren't that important. And that's kind of what we want to really avoid. So the question we really asked was that, if today somebody said, OK, how can you change the physical experience using technology? What tools will we turn to? We turn to screens, essentially. And we turn to Microsoft Surface. We turn to projectors and infrared detectors and all that kind of stuff. and we can create those things in physical environments. Now, that is the thing we do today. We're very happy doing that today. But what we wanted to explore was, what's the opportunity beyond that? Because what we really think is just creating an interior aesthetic and an interior experience. So we're taking the box of the building and we're just putting a load of stuff in. And we're not then talking to things like the building itself. And that's really what we kind of wanted to look at. So, am I going backwards? No. The new Renaissance, let's hope that will appear as a trend soon on Twitter, I'm sure. Not. Was between us, the digital guys and girls, and them. And in this case, it's the people who are responsible for those fabric of those buildings. So again, that alternative perspective, it's architects. So we found some architects. Fortunately, a lot of them get schooled quite close to where we work. The Architectural Association is one of the world's kind of most prestigious private architecture schools, and they have a reputation really for kind of unpicking architecture and challenging what architecture is all about. So we thought it was a good place to talk to kind of look at some of these opportunities. If anyone was open to looking at these opportunities, we thought it was them. And fortunately, they were. So we spent some time very early with just formulating this thought about how total experience design might then play into this. And we asked questions like, well, what if data could affect the physical space? So based on sensor inputs or based on configuration, can we adapt the physicality of a building? One of the things that interests those guys intensely is this concept of parametric design. So creating a design, it's a thought that we, without knowing it, we kind of applied to some of our stuff, which is that if I change one parameter, how will that then affect the experience? Now, to them, that means changing a building from being a library to a conference center, for example. So the parameters are the number of people, where they're going, we've got those kind of things. If we should be able to shift them, and the building should be able to adapt to that. And we asked the architects, what's your job? And they said, our job is to orchestrate the experiences that happen inside the building through design. And we said, okay, because we thought that could probably be our job if we worked in that space. We would see that as part of it. So actually, maybe that is a thing to look at. And we set ourselves some constraints as well. So it would be easy to go in and say, well, let's put lots of screens everywhere and lots of stuff. And actually, let's challenge ourselves a bit more and think a bit deeper in terms of what we could achieve if we incorporated stuff into the fabric of the building. And we asked them what their kind of points of inspiration were. And they showed us things like this. And so look, here is a structure that is completely flexible in how it shapes itself. So these pylons, or I guess big rods that kind of move up and down, and literally reconfigure the space. So I could transform this space into any number of things. I could magically make seats appear when people were standing around, for example. And they showed us things like this, which is more in the realms of kinetic sculpture, but equally shows some of the opportunities. So if this were our open spaces, and we were congregating around, and we were getting about 10 or 15 minutes in and all feeling a bit uncomfortable, if magically little mounds appeared that we could sit on, that would be an amazing thing for a building to do. Obviously, all sorts of considerations about trip hazards and accessibility and stuff. But these are the kinds of things that they were saying to us. But also more simply than that, one of the architects said, it's not necessarily about moving the space. It's about the architects leaving artifacts in the space that can be augmented by digital technology, and showed us this, which is just taking a little while to kick in. But this is an exercise in what this guy calls augmented sculpture. So what you're looking at is the physical object and then a light projection system that's creating new things by combining the two things together. And that essentially is what the architect said to us, is that's what we really want to do. We want to have something that's an integrated approach between the physical design and the digital design, because out of that we think we can create things that are better. And that wholeheartedly I agree with. So their reference points were these concepts of parametric design, looking at the spatiality, is that even a word? The physicality of the experience as well, but certainly trying to avoid this idea of just putting a load of screens in. So running that experience planning process then helps us drive out the thinking around that. So we applied these ways of thinking. And And we thought we'd take something that was a bit more familiar this time. So last year we did space travel, and that wasn't that familiar to many people. So this time, it's about conferences. Anyone been to a conference recently? That's the Venetian. And that massive, massive bit on the right is where we are. Now, we are one of, I think, 4 conferences running in this convention center. And this is one of the smaller convention centers in Vegas. And these places are designed as just massive boxes, because that's the way the space can be most configurable. And you'll see these walls that move, and we can open this space up. And the buildings are designed to be configurable, but in a pretty basic way. So we wanted to re-look at that experience, applying some of these kind of modes of thinking. And we generated a range of needs. So what is it that you want from a conference? So if I said to you, you've just come back from MIX, how are you feeling? What would you say to me? And these are some of the things that fell out. Any of these familiar to anyone in the room? All of them? None of them? Anyone got any to add? I'll let those dwell on you for a minute. And the big question was really, what are the odds on you getting that? So you either go to conferences and it's brilliant, or it's not. Now, what are the things that affect whether it's brilliant or not? And largely, we thought it was about who you are, as well as, obviously, the conference itself. And we followed 3 user journeys. So we picked some reasonably challenging personas. Max, who you'll recognize probably as a real networker, somebody who's going to come to a conference, they'll have set up a whole lot of relationships, tweet-ups, meetings, they'll be in all the right places at all the right times. You never know how they know about this stuff, but they all seem to do. And you just know that this guy's going to work this to the extent he's going to have a brilliant time, he's going to learn lots, he's going to get everything that he wanted from this conference, even if potentially the content isn't actually there on stage. Julie, different proposition entirely. So she didn't choose to come here, she's working, she's a journalist. She's got a job to do. She's got a very specific brief. She's got to deliver some copy at some specific times. She has incredibly different needs. She's just rocked in from South by Southwest, and she's absolutely shattered. You know, what's her experience? How can we ensure that she has the right experience? Sam didn't really want to come. His boss said, we're doing this project, and we're doing it in WPF, so you're going to need to learn Blend. So you need to go to this conference and learn it. Make sure you come back having learned something. And he's quite shy, and he's not necessarily a big networker. But he would benefit from a lot of those things that we kind of showed early on. So the point really was taking them on those journeys and seeing where they went, really. And journeys that don't end when they kind of leave the screen. So they start at home with that kind of initial, why am I going, what do I want to achieve? What are all the steps along the way that are going to get me to the point where I come back and say, that was brilliant. And that's the thing we're really aiming at. So the process that we use, we showed you something like this last time, but it's a very lo-fi process. It's about taking a blank sheet of paper and mapping out all of the emotional needs, the emotional states of users in that journey, starting to sketch out some of the ideas, using we call them characters at this stage, because this is a process that should go relatively quickly, so we don't necessarily have time to do fully fledged research, but we do as much research as we can. And this is the process, like any creative process, where the kind of magic happens, I guess, because it's when the people are collaborating together. And actually, that's the most important bit. What comes out the other end of it doesn't really matter, because the knowledge that those people acquired in that process is the most valuable thing. And one of the things that we kind of track through this is we plot how are these people feeling at each stage in this journey, because what that tells us is where we need to focus. So where you see little dips in their emotional state, there's something that psychologists call positive affect, and it's basically how good a mood you're in. And there's a scale of measuring it called the positive and negative affect schedule. So if you want to Google live search PANAS when you get home, you'll find that. And when you follow these 3 users, you see that, you know, keynotes, obviously, amazing. We love keynotes. They're brilliant. The networking was amazing. But someone like Sam probably isn't a big networker, so doesn't get that buzz. And potentially at the Town Mixer is not really getting what he wants from that experience. And we thought, how typical is that? And we extended our range of thinking. We literally sat some people down and said, okay, and they were broadly typed in a number of categories. And we asked quite a lot of people, and I just picked out a few examples. And to be honest, it's pretty random. Now, no matter what you are like, what the conference is like, it's pretty random as to whether or not you get anything out of it, who you bump into, what the content was like, what your room was like, whether or not you could find registration. All those things will just flip you up or flip you down pretty randomly. And the job that we set about was really to see, can we orchestrate this a bit better so we can facilitate those journeys and actually not guarantee an outcome, but make the outcome as good as it possibly can be for those particular people that are coming. So we want to use the built environment and digital technology in that environment to positively affect that. And I was watching Deborah Adler at the keynote, and she used the term changing behavior through design. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Dynamic presentation, you see. Good. But also to create a set of services. So we need to think about repeatability. So when a conference organizer rocks up to the Venetian Conference Center and says, right, so what can we do? Immediately the conference organizer says, well, these things are available. Now today that is, you can have a screen, you can have some lights, you can have some tea and coffee, you can have some food. Those are the services they offer today. Can we widen that range of services to kind of make this stuff more kind of built in, if you like? So the experience architecture we crafted around this was about chunking the experience up into manageable pieces and then focusing on each of those pieces in turn. And they're the pieces that you'd expect. So where we're pre-planning and we're researching who's on, why am I going, what do I want to get out of this, what are the tools that I'm going to be using, what's the website do, what do the mobile devices do, what things have I got access to. But then it starts to get a bit more interesting. We start to walk into the building itself. So we looked at all the layers. We looked at the fabric of the building. We looked at the inputs and outputs. And the best diagram of all is this one here, because I did it in PowerPoint. So it's beautiful. But we look at, so there's the floor. It's concrete. It might have pressure sensors in it. It might be imbued with these dust motes, which probably aren't microscopic, but they're probably still this big. But they are potentially doing things like detecting pressure. We can be looking at near-field communication detection by layering that into the floor surfaces. So starting to put those detection loops where they can give us a granular view of, for example, where somebody is if they're carrying an RFID-enabled device. We can put LED lighting into places, and we can create sheets of LED lights that effectively are pixels that we can use to create images, to create text, to create signage. And then we stick the whole lot on top again. So we've now got this kind of detection field, if you like, where we can create zones where we can see people and we can entirely control the light, sound, visual experience in that zone, down to the last potentially meter or square meter. So as I stand in a particular area, we can control exactly what they're hearing. We can record what they're saying, potentially. We can create what's on the floor around them. We can create virtual spaces just using light, sound, and the physical space alone. So the first real kind of experience principle we set up was about the concept of flow. Now, the definition of flow, if you Wikipedia it, is often talked about in the concept of gaming, where you get into a zone where everything just seems to be working and your brain is going at such a pace where things just flow beautifully. They fit together. In this context, we're really talking about making sure that there are as few barriers as possible. So when you get that kind of fail tag on something like Twitter, just getting rid of those, trying to eliminate those as much as possible. So the first point where we start is to say, okay, so let's take the physical space, let's create architecturally things that are both display outputs and physical inputs. So when it's registration time, we have an entire massive area that it has a perfect shape so that when I stand in front of it, I can put my bag on it and my feet don't kick the wall. But at the same time transforms itself into a display that's dynamic according to what I need from that at the time. So when I am registering and I stand in front of this device, First thing is this little slot down here just spits out a card because it knows that I'm standing here, and that's therefore the place that it wants to come out. And the technology that's on this card is available today. So we work with banks who are looking at how, not looking at, but they're working with existing technology that works on a credit card, that's as thin as a credit card you would expect, but has a fully featured keypad and LCD display layout on it. Now that technology, it's out there. People are selling it today. We're not using it. If we were to use it here, we might use it to say things like, what's your status? So as I'm wandering around the conference, do I want to be tracked, or am I just going to wander off onto the casino floor and like not have anyone know where I am? Okay, and if that's the case, I'll just go into snooze mode. If I'm busy in a meeting, I'll just set it to busy. So it's the equivalent of physical presence. So in the context of something like Instant Messenger would have presence. This is literally what is the presence, what's your status in this space? What can I do with you? So then the building knows, is he private? Yeah, what are the privacy issues around this? Can I track him? Can I listen to him? Can I take what's being said in the room that he's in and transcribe it to text and store that somewhere, or not? Those are all the kind of questions. So having something like this at the heart of an experience like this is kind of critical, because unless we know who you are, we can't personalize, and we can't give you things that you need in the context of flow, because flow is all about what are you going to need next, and gently anticipating that as well as we can without being Big Brother-like. So at registration, or in fact any other time, rather than wandering up to a kiosk, and there might be a line or they might be all busy, if the interfaces are ambient, so if they're not interfaces until you walk up to them, or if they're signs until you walk up to them, but when you walk up to them and you indicate you want to do something specific, they transform into something specific. So I'd like to find Taylor, see where she is. Yeah, she's open, so I can track her. I can see the physical space, and now this building is going to get us together. Because that's what buildings can do if they're enabled in this way, and the design, the experiential design, in terms of the relationship with digital is such that it's providing the outputs that give you the information you need to do that. And it's very easy also to say, hang on a minute, we don't even need these interfaces. Everyone's got a mobile phone, everyone's got a PDA, everyone's got a laptop. But they're not necessarily the right context for everything. They're still small, they're still fiddly, they're not necessarily the right input device. So using the concept of ubiquity, where the data is available, the device is ubiquitous, and I can identify myself to it using my card, then why wouldn't we transform devices? But the mobile phone still plays its part, because if I'm sitting in the lunch hall, I don't want to get up, then that's the right device for that moment. And it should give me the same experience that I get on all those other things, but just in a more kind of defined, specific context. Just let me click it down. There it is. Excuse me. Signage, wayfinding. Now, how much attention did the MIX organizers pay to signage at this event? A lot is the answer. And there's reasons for that. They want you to go to the right place, they want you to turn up at the right time. And when you've got potentially 7,000 or 8,000 people all flowing through one entrance, going to 4 or 5 different conferences, that's a problem that a building owner has to orchestrate and gently tease and coax you to go the right way. Now, in environments that are built very specifically for this purpose, and start looking for this when you go to the airport, look for clues of this. So certainly at Heathrow, where we have a very kind of one-way flow, even the carpet is designed to make you think, I should walk in that direction. The lines and the flow of the physical aesthetic of the carpet is, yeah, it feels wrong to walk that way, so I'm going to walk this way. It's subconscious, it's visceral. And with the ability to work out who's in a space, we can intelligently adapt signage to reflect that. So if we've got 1,500 people coming down, they're only going to one place, there's only one sign they want to see, and everything else is secondary. Now, MIX take the other approach, which is that if you walk back down that corridor from the casino floor, they're all MIX signs, and you've got a couple of little signs for the other conventions. They haven't quite got that. But it's really, really important. And the opportunity to go even further than that is, if I'm going to something very specific, I'm going to have signage that's specific just to me. So maybe I'm looking for Tricky over there, and Tricky's little face appears on a little face. on a wall and says, yeah, it's this way, you're going the right direction. And then intelligently adapts that when I decide I'm going to go this way, then like the satellite navigation, eventually it stops telling me to turn around and says, okay, I'll reconfigure myself and take you this way instead. We have the ability to do that, so why wouldn't we? And we talked about flow, and now it's time for slow. So this is something that we've been thinking about more and more, particularly with Microsoft Surface, because the best way to use Surface is to sit down as a group of people around the device and do something together. Now, that means we need to move away from some of the concepts that we typically use in digital design, which is how do we get people through this as fast as possible with as few barriers? That's not necessarily what we're trying to do. Sometimes we need to slow people down. And in the context of conferences, we're doing things like wanting to facilitate conversations. So how can we stop you as you're walking out of here, slow you down, make you comfortable, and get you talking about an interesting topic with some people that are like-minded? That's a pretty big challenge. So slow is about those kind of things and how we do that. So it might be around how data is visualized. Now we use today, we use services like Everything, excuse me. And what Everything does is speech-to-text transcription so that you can index video. Now again, if we've got these macro environments that we can create, why wouldn't we take the audio recorded from a conversation and discussion and index it and create literal tag clouds? So little slices of perspex or whatever they might be with projected images that show what's being talked about in that area. So imagine the open spaces or a networking room where literally you walk in and you kind of, where's the interesting discussion? It's over there. And hone in on it. Somebody in this process said, this is kind of like doing Twitter for a building. And it's actually, yeah, I kind of get the point, it is. Because, services like Twitter come to life because people find the way that they fit into their lives, and they create the tools that actually make them meaningful, like Twitter Buzz and Twitter Scan, all that kind of stuff. So why wouldn't we do that in the built environment? So what you then end up with is a kind of holistic picture about what's the overall experience, what are the inputs, what are the touch points, what are our opportunities for making a difference in this space and to this particular user and the other users that we're considering. And that's kind of where that process ends up. So I'm guessing not many people work in the conference business, apart from the guys sitting at the back. So it is worth talking for a minute about how does this stuff apply in some of the areas that we typically work in. And multi-channel is, I guess, the buzzword that's been talked about for a long time. And we're now working with online-only companies. Some of them are insurers, some of them are banks, some of them are retailers, who are increasingly saying, I want to have a physical touch point with people. And if you go look up pop-up stores, you'll find a lot of examples where companies, particularly retailers, are arriving in somewhere that they don't traditionally inhabit, setting up a store very quickly using some materials that almost literally pop up, having it there for a few days and then going away again. We were talking with a customer about Microsoft Surface. And one of the guys sat there, and was very, very senior decision makers in this company, and said, "This is irrelevant to me. Why? We don't do face-to-face. It's irrelevant." And the most senior guy in the room said, "You're missing the point. This is completely relevant because that's what we're missing today is a physical touch point with our customers because they can get that at other places. And if we can provide that in some way, whether it's purely a digital touch point or a face-to-face around the table, that's going to enhance our business, it's going to enhance loyalty, it's going to enhance the advocacy that people have towards us as a business." And the research journeys that take place, who in this room has not researched something online before they've walked into a store and bought it? Or vice versa, gone into a store, looked at things, then gone online and bought it. That's normal. That's the way people work. And people need occasionally to go face-to-face. So those new paradigms really that we looked at say, flow is all about that kind of hoverboard experience, if you like. So things just seem to work. You never bump into anything. You never have to make a wrong turn. Things are just kind of there when you need them. But also to take you back out again and not lose you once you walk out of the building. And then slow is about that, taking the time, getting people to explore, using things like visual search, using things like Surface, to slow people down and put them in an environment where actually you're going to take more time, you're going to make them think, you're going to make them talk and explore. So, what's next for us? Well, we use the learnings from this every day. So if it's a kiosk implementation, if it's so self-service check-in kiosk, for example, at the airport, whether it's a surface thing, we use this thinking every day, but we don't have the opportunity to influence necessarily as far down as we would like. We don't get to talk to architects every day. We sometimes get to talk to interior designers. We sometimes get to talk to signage people. It depends how far up or down the stack it is. But we use this stuff pretty much every day. Particularly with the concept of the digital building, we're going to take this forward as a piece of thinking. I suspect it will end up as initially something that goes up for some funding. But we're looking to develop a proof of concept probably in the next year to 18 months that proves that some of this stuff works. And then hopefully do a building. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe we'll see it here next year. Probably not. So the three things that I'd leave you with is, nothing's out of scope. And experience planning is that process that it's about orchestrating experiences and driving out innovation. New Renaissance thinking is about the collaboration between people with different perspectives who understand different opportunities, different technologies, different ways of thinking. And the total experience design philosophy that says you have a right to look at every single aspect of that experience, even if you only end up executing in one of those channels. And that's, I think, is the key thing. So that is it for me today. So, and we do have time. We have 8 minutes and 26 seconds for questions. So I'll invite questions and say thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much. Hello. Privacy.
Talk a little bit about how that affects the concept of having a card that's tracking.
Yep. So the question essentially is, what are the privacy implications for being tracked? And they're massive. I mean, it's the biggest, and we have some brilliant newspapers in the UK, some of which we work for. But they take great delight in saying, in fact, there's a story breaking today because Google have just done a street view for the UK. Privacy this, privacy that. There's people, you can see people and number plates, and it's like terrorists can use this to invade our homes and that kind of stuff. So people love to scaremonger. So it's absolutely critical you have a good story on this. So our good story on that thinking was it's individual choice. So that's why I have that card, is because I can set my status and say, no, I'm not into this. I don't like this. And we can make commitments that we're not going to capture that data anyway, because we could do. It's probably within our legal rights to do so. But we've got to provide that get-out for people so they know, they feel comfortable. So certainly considered, but a long way to go on making and selling it. Anyone else? Is Mr. Clayton still here? Somewhere? What came up on Twitter? Anyone? I'll just find out if you don't tell me. If the answer is nothing, it's going to be really disappointing. Okay, will my slides be available online? Yes, they will. A guy took them off earlier, so they're available. None of the videos are in there because they just don't work. Hypersonic sound cannon used to stop annoying people, or to annoy people deliberately, who knows. Thank you very much to Harry. I'm just trying to find the clean ones. Okay, well that's probably positive, thank you. I won't go into some of those, but there's no specific questions. So unless anyone has got anything they want to say, shout, opinions, views, general idle threats, all welcome. No, I won't push it then. Okay, thanks very much again. Please fill in your evaluation forms. They're really, really, really important. I'll take them from you and doctor them before you put them in if you like. But anyway, thank you again.